Good morning from Area 51 Raceway, and we are here on the second part of our build for the Fairlane. We got the model in. I've ordered some wheels and tires from Slot Car Corner. The widest I could go as far as for this particular model because it's the modified stalker and it's got some real wide wheel wells on it, as you could see. What originally came with the model were plastic wheels, and you can see how large these are. I could go with a foam wheel, possibly this big. I haven't really looked into it and use a foam wheel, but I really don't want to use foam wheels, and you can see the difference in size compared to this one. So there is a difference, but this is a slot car. I'm not really building a static scale model car, so I think these will be fine. These have been trued down. So when we get the other ones, we'll see where we're at. So what I wanted to talk about was when you're soldering your bracket. And the one thing I didn't do, all I did was show on how to solder the bracket and stuff, and set everything in there. And also you want to remember, make sure that that axle slide in nice and smoothly. It should be able to drop through real easy. That means you got it aligned real well. That's why we put the the bushings in and the axle in and the motor, just to kind of get a nice square uh, way of getting it soldered in, and then the axle will move real nice and smooth. You want that, and want the least resistance in there, and this is where we're at with this, which is good. Now what I wanted to talk about is that before you do all that, and I didn't have the model, so I took a chance to see if that would do it, and sure enough it did. From just building a lot of these, you get a little bit of experience on what you could judge. But since I knew I could get away with it with this car because it's got the extra larger wheel well, so I could have them sticking out a little bit so it wouldn't matter. So I had a little bit less. I could always use axle spacers. But what I want to get at is that when you get your model, you want to size the width up. Now this car I could get away with, so actually pretty spot on right there. That'll work. But when you're dealing with other cars that don't have large wheel wells and that are, stock wheel wells, you could see this ain't going to cut it, because that would hit the wheel wells and then you'd have rubbing, and then you'd have to trim the body. And if you don't want to do that, you want to make sure you get the right size wheels, and cut the axle tube the same, the width you want it to. Now for example, here's what you primarily do is you get your axle tube, your bushings in there, and then your wheels, your wheels that you selected, and if you had tires, put them on as well. These are obviously without the tires, and these are narrower, these wheels. So as you could see, I could put it in here and it would be within, it'd give you some wiggle room. And as always, you can space this out if you don't get it perfect. And if you do get it perfect, well, that's pretty good. Good for you. That's good that you did that. But again, there's ways of, let me get my hand out of the way. There's ways of determining stuff. You just have to, figure it out and experiment and make sure you get the right tire size and stuff like that. Now, I do have a set of tires lying around, so we could put a set of tires on this. Let me get up and get my little tire stock here that I have. So if you say you want to go 28 125s, you could put the 28 125s. Say you have the tires already, you've made your tire selection, and then this way you could also do this, and as you can see, those would fit in there fine with the tire. And then if you need to space them out, you can space them out. But you want to make sure before you solder this to the bracket that maybe you have them a little wider. However, you judge it in here, or how far you want it to go in, out actually, how much more width you want. You just want to make sure that they're not rubbing against the wheel well like this. You want some space into it. So before you solder this tube onto the bracket, it is best to get your wheel and tires first, and your model, and then you cut your tube to size to what width you want in this. And that's how you would do that step first. And I'm sorry I didn't really say that. I just did the soldering of the bracket to show how that was soldered on and stuff, because I knew on this particular car right here where I was going with. But when you're dealing with other models that don't have hogged out wheel wells like that one does, then you have to do this to get your size. Now as far as on proxy builds for Home Racing World, If you are doing 1/32 scale cars, the maximum width is 2 5/8, and that's due to lane spacing. You don't want to go more than 2 5/8. So say you are over, that's not a, you don't want that. According to whatever rules are stated on there, how wide you could go. So this is 2 3/8. So we're good. So your maximum width be 2 5/8 if you were to go 2 5/8. That'd be pretty much your, you know, about a quarter of an inch more maybe. So I mean, that would be your guide for that on 1/32 showdown cars and 1/32 modified cars, I believe also. But if you're dealing with the larger cars, it depends what rules have been set. I know they've gone a little wider than 2 5/8, but again, you go by whatever rules are set on Home Racing World, and they do have them, you know, how wide you could go and stuff. And if you're not sure, you could always email and ask, hey, how wide can I go? This is where it's at. And you know, you will either get, you know, the thumbs up or thumbs down whether you could do it or not, or if you need to, you know, narrow it down. But for this particular car, this is just for me to have on my track to have fun. But I mean, they fit in there well. I could have them come out a little bit also if I wanted to, like that, which would be kind of cool. But I don't know. It just depends how I'm gonna, you know, go on with this. But this is pretty much the what everything looks like. And as far as, you know, builds and stuff, like, so it's just, you know, you go by the rules. But for this build that I'm doing for, you know, the video, I'm just putting something together for myself. I think this car is going to be cool once I'm done. I'm going to try and do something different with the paint job if I can. I'm not an expert painter. I'm just going to make an attempt and see what happens, and we'll see how that goes. But here's the second step on just explaining, you know, part 2, explaining, you know, the widths of your axle tube and your motor bracket and stuff like that, and where we'd be at. And right there is pretty good actually. And like, again, I could always space this out if I wanted to. So, but that's it from Area 51 Raceway. Just wanted to cover that. Next video, we'll start on our rails when we get our wheels and tires in, and we'll go from there. As always, take care and have fun racing.